Welcome to Built to Go, a Vanlife podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Wagg, coming to you from the College of Curiosity. This time it's episode 287, and we're going to talk about the best apps to use for van life. I've done this before. It's long since time I do it again, and, well, it's not what you think. We're also going to talk about an amazing place to visit that you've probably never heard of, cooking with electricity and magnetism, and a very common resource that you could be overlooking. Hello everyone, welcome back. I am going to VanFest for absolutely 100% sure next week. In fact, I'm going to record live podcasts at VanFest, and well, we'll just have to see what happens with that. So you'll be hearing more about VanFest. And to be clear, I'm talking about vanfestusa.com and the specific event Liftoff, which is held at Space Coast Daily Center in Melbourne, Florida. I know many of you will be here, there. We will meet there. How's that? And we will have good times because you've reached out to me and said that, hey, you're going great. This is a fun thing. I'm very excited to be able to go. And I am going to bring my truck pod camper thing that is not built out yet. And I can't do any work on it at all until I leave. So I'm going to leave a few days early, try to get down below the freeze point and do a bit of work before I get there. But worst case is I'm sleeping in a tent, and that is not such a bad thing. I will have my batteries and all my cooking stuff and whatever plumbing I end up with. Anyway, I'm not going to die because it actually turns out van life isn't all that hard to just jump right into. You can kind of build your airplane as you're flying. And while that would be a great topic for a podcast, it's not the topic for this one. So let's actually talk about that topic. A very popular topic in van life is what are the best apps to use? What apps do you use to find campsites and all this stuff? And I did an episode like that a long time ago, and I looked back on it and I'm like, wow, this is kind of out of date. You know, a lot of stuff has changed in the world of apps and just apps in general. And so let me just drop this bomb on you right now. Apps are not where it's at. I've actually gotten away from using apps. I have used websites much, much more often. And I'm going to kind of focus on that here. The only thing I use apps for now are, well, like games and stuff like that, but specific things where they're required, like I have some parking apps that I can't do any other way, and things associated with like my ring cams and stuff like that. But for my van life stuff, I almost always use the web now, and I will explain as we go. That said, you do need a good list of websites. Google isn't what it used to be. I mean, the sad truth is that Google was a very powerful tool 15 years ago. It was the end-all, be-all of accessing the sum of human knowledge, and it's just not that way anymore. It's been so compromised with what they want to show you versus what you want to see, and all the people optimizing their SEO to throw in fake links that look like they're actually what you're supposed to be seeing, that it's not only difficult to use, it's often hazardous to use. I have a bunch of people who have tried to do things like get visas or book hotels, and they thought they were getting the visas from the government that required the visas or the hotel chain offering the hotel, but it turns out they weren't, and they were charged a fee to use this service, which was really just a website in the way of what you wanted to do. So I am kind of down on Google.com as a search engine these days. I still use it, but I don't trust it. And that's a whole problem for another day. So I do have a list of websites that I use frequently for van life, and I thought that I would share that with you. I'm happy to have a discussion about this. Anybody has any comments about any of this, please get in touch with me at jeff@builttogo.com. That's 2 T's, not 3, not 1. And we can talk about it at VanFest, too, if you happen to be there. So here's my list. Number 1, of course, have to mention iOverlander. And iOverlander is the one that got me to realize that apps aren't necessarily the way to go. iOverlander has been the number 1 van life app forever and ever and ever. It is the place you go to find places to stay for the night. And it's a good model. It's crowdsourced, and it's up to date in that everybody who stays at one of these places can add a review. If things change, they can type in and say, hey, this place doesn't allow camping anymore, or, the road is washed out, whatever the case may be. And then I've talked about the iOverlander problem, which is that if you add something to iOverlander, it can get overrun and then its status can change from a place you can camp to a place you can't camp. That is also a separate issue we're going to put aside. But the big issue with iOverlander is that they updated the app and it's crap. I mean, they ruined it, in my opinion. Now, unless you pay for the app, it's just awkward to use. It doesn't have the information and it's terrible. And I stopped using it. Now, I use the website, which works like it always did. The website is a completely different experience from the app. So, screw the app. I'm getting comfortable using the web on the phone. I mean, it's a little awkward because things aren't necessarily optimized as well, but you can do it, and you can play around with different browsers and see which one you like. I'm not going to recommend a browser. Use whatever you like. But iOverlander.com on the web is just what it has always been. You can go on the website, search for a place, read comments about places to stay. Things come, things go. It's the same as it always was. Every single person who van lifes, who boondocks, should have iOverlander, in my opinion. However, one of the values of these websites with all these sites is that you can cross-reference against them. So I actually don't just trust iOverlander. I start with iOverlander, and then I also look at Campendium, which is campendium.com. They have an app. They have a paid service. But their free service is pretty good, but it's more geared towards paid websites. So if I can find something on both iOverlander and Campendium.com, that's great. Then I can get some real good data. But iOverlander still, in my opinion, has the better free stuff, which is usually what I'm looking for. On the side of the free stuff, one of the very first websites to do this was freecampsites.net. And this originally, I believe, started out as a place for people to camp in tents for free. And then they started including van life. This is a very grassroots, crowdsourced thing, and a lot of their data is really, really old. But it's still data. And while I used to go to them first, I now use them as just an adjunct to iOverlander. So if I see something on iOverlander, I'll check it in Campendium and Free Campsites, and then I will make a decision based on there. And then I'll pick another site because I always want to have a backup. Now, there's a bunch that I'm not going to mention. Road Trippers, The Dirt, All Stays. And the reason is that without a subscription, they're not really useful that much, in my opinion. Their websites aren't very good, so I'm just skipping them. You're free to try them on your own. See if I'm wrong. That is totally fine. But this is my recommendation. Now, on the government side of things in the U.S., looking for government campsites, it's a little tricky. The government has never been very good at websites. That is for sure. But the two that I use sometimes is recreation.gov, which is the big overarching website of all the government-run campsites for the federal government, and then specifically the Forest Service Travel Access website, which has a more complicated URL. And yes, all these are listed on the website at builttogo.com and in the show notes. This one is https://apps, though it's not an app, .fs.fed.us/ capital travel, capital access, / without a space. Yeah, it's in the show notes. But this one is a very detailed way of finding places to camp. It explains all the rules, and there's some maps there, and it's complicated. I mean, you can't just go on the Forest Service and just park and think you're fine. There are rules, there are fees that aren't necessarily obvious. Sometimes you have to pay online, sometimes it's a ranger station. So you do have to do some research, and those websites can help. Now, as for mapping in general, which website... Very specifically, which website do I use for mapping? When I'm planning a trip, I always start with Google Maps. Mostly because it's what I've been using since it first came out, 20 years ago, or whenever they bought that company. It's good. Google Maps is good. It has a lot of features that are hidden. One of the things I really like to do is if I'm going somewhere, I'll go to the Street View level, and then I'll go back in time, because in the Street View level, you can choose which photographs to use, and some places have multiple photographs, and you can see how a place has changed over time. I love that. In fact, there's a VR app that lets you do that. That is fun. You get to actually walk around these places in VR, which was super helpful when I went to Ushuaia at the bottom of South America, which I'm getting a little off topic, aren't I? Okay, anyway. But a feature of Google Maps that I don't know that everyone knows that I find super, super useful is google.com/mymaps. All one word, google.com/mymaps. It takes you to something that looks like maps.com, maps.google.com or Google Maps, but it isn't. It is a customizable private mapping system where you can add waypoints and draw lines and determine distances and try out different sets of directions and then save it. And then you can use that later or share it with friends or whatever you want to do. It's pretty customizable. It does have a few limits, but one thing that I like, you can import a CSV into it. Now, if you don't know what a CSV is and you're not comfortable in spreadsheets, this probably isn't going to be useful to you. But if you are, you can create a spreadsheet of all the places you want to go, and as long as you include an address or a latitude and longitude, you can upload that CSV to Google, My Google Maps, I think is what it's called, and it will add them all to the map with little icons. So you don't have to do all the tedious work of finding the place and putting the dot and all that. I really appreciate that, and I used it extensively when I was visiting all the auroras. So if you haven't encountered that feature, there's a good tip right there. Heck, that was worth the cost of the podcast right there. Okay, for weather, there are a bunch of good free paid apps. The weather apps have not gotten better in most cases, in my opinion. Dark Sky on the iPhone was wonderful, and then Apple bought it, and now all those features are buried in their convoluted weather app. Anyway, not an uncommon story, and of course, only accessible to Apple people these days. But one app that I continually go to now is Ventusky. Windy.com you may hear mentioned as a good app, and I agree, but unless you pay for it, it's not as good, in my opinion, as Ventusky, and Ventusky is cheaper. I've mentioned this before. It's Ventusky, Ventusky.com. Now, Ventusky's app is one that I have on my phone, but the website is just as good. So what it's really useful for isn't so much as, what's the weather today? I mean, you can get that from everything. It's looking at weather patterns long term, and you can use it for travel planning. What's it going to be like 10 days from now, 1,000 miles from me? That kind of planning. And it's also really good at wind. Wind data is a little bit hard to come by. It's not something they mention on the news very much unless it's extreme, but wind can be super important to campers and people in vans. Can you put your tarp up? Do you have to take your awning down? Can you leave your chairs out? All that kind of stuff. Wind can matter. So, Ventusky for that. Now, for those of us who don't have Starlink and are dependent on an internet connection, we usually use cellular. So, do you have connectivity where you go? Can be a big thing. Like, I need to record on the road next week, so wherever I stay, I need to have internet access. I would love to be able to just use my cell phone. If I can do that, great. But can I? Well, you won't actually know till you get there, but you can do a little bit of testing, and there's a number of sites that do this. But this site is free and pretty simple, and is called cellmapper.com. .net. Cellmapper.net. Just like it sounds, cellmapper.net. And it comes up with this big map, and you choose your service, so AT&T, and you can even choose 5G or 4G, and then it will show you basically every tower in the United States, and then you can figure out if you have service or not from that. Now, there's a difference to a tower in Nebraska and a tower in West Virginia. Just because you're near the tower doesn't mean you'll have service. A tower in Nebraska is going to go a lot farther and cover a lot more than a tower in West Virginia simply because of the topography. So you do have to be a little bit more careful. But for a general idea, you can look at this map and get some sense of what it's going to be like. For one thing I notice is that if you're in the western U.S., it looks like there's a lot more Verizon coverage out there than AT&T, and if you have AT&T, it looks much better in the east. So if you're going to focus on one area, you might want to take that into consideration. But useful app, it's free, cellmapper.net. Okay, gas prices. Let's talk about that. Gas prices are fairly good right now, so it's not on everyone's mind necessarily, but gas prices always matter. So the traditional thing to recommend for gas prices is Gas Buddy. But they have turned into a predatory company, in my opinion. They use your data, and they can use it against you. So I am not recommending the Gas Buddy app. I will loosely recommend the Gas Buddy website because you can get nearly all the same data and you can do it anonymously. You can open an incognito or a private browsing window and use Gas Buddy, get the data, and get out, and they really can't do much with that data you've given them. They probably know where you are and stuff like that, but it's the minimal amount of data. And you get the up-to-date, up-to-the-minute reports of what a gas price is at a certain station. But I find that is less important than the general trend of gas prices. I travel long distances usually. There's not a lot of van life stuff I do in Chicago because I live in Chicago. I sleep in Chicago, so I'm not spending a lot of nights in my van near Chicago. But what state should I get gas in? Should I get gas in Illinois or in Iowa or Nebraska? How should I plan this? Is it worth it for me to fill up here because it's not going to matter? Or should I not fill up here and wait till I get across the border? A great site for that level of gas price info, and this is down to the county level, is AAA, and you do not need to be a member. So it's gasprices.aaa.com. You go there, and it's a big map, and you can see all kinds of trends on the map. Folks on the west coast of the U.S. are paying most for gas, all the way up and down the coast. There's no question. Things are a little cheaper in eastern Oregon versus western Oregon. That's not too surprising. Cheapest places for gas in the middle of the country, west of Illinois, and then south. So like Louisiana, you're great. That's your sweet spot for cheap gas right now. As you go east, the prices go up a little bit, not quite to the California levels. And Florida actually has higher price gas than a lot of other places too. And you can see all this right on the map just by looking. So when I'm driving down to VanFest, I can see that I want to plan to get gas in Tennessee if possible. Now, obviously, I'm not going to risk running out of gas. That's not the point of this. But I have a vehicle with a very large gas tank. When I don't have a big thing on the back of it, I can get 550 miles or so out of a tank. That gives me a lot of options. So I will try for Tennessee. And, with prices the way they are, it's not going to matter that much. A 50 cents increase for me is $15 or so more at the tank. It's not nothing, but it's something, and you have to weigh that too. Just how much is this worth it? Here in Chicago, I live next to a Costco, or near it, and people line up for half an hour to get gas at Costco. Is it worth it? It is to them, I guess, but to me, that half hour is worth a lot more than the 5 or 10 cents a gallon I'm saving in gas. And the last one I'm going to mention, because, folks, it's here, is ChatGPT. Now hear me out. I feel like this AI thing is turning into like veganism, right? So some people just won't touch meat for ethical reasons or health reasons or whatever. I don't care. You have your reasons. That's fine. I respect that. And it's the same thing with AI. AI is terrible for the environment. It has stolen content from people. It gets things wrong all the time. It's taking over society. Whatever your beliefs, whatever you think about that, that is fine. I probably don't disagree with you. However, just like there is such a thing as a really good hot dog, AI can be a really useful, back up and I'll say it again, a really useful tool for van life. ChatGPT is the best all-around AI, I suppose. They're always changing. A week from now, that might be different. But for all-around use, ChatGPT is probably the best, and you can use it in very creative ways. So here's what I would use it for from a van life perspective. I run my ideas for how I'm going to build up my rig past ChatGPT, and it gives me feedback. What does it know about van life? Why should I listen to it? Well, I don't. I don't trust it. I verify everything it says, but it gives me ideas. And it's getting its data from things like Reddit and websites. So it's not just making stuff up in this case. It's actually basically asking all of Reddit, hey, is it a good idea to use gravity-fed plumbing in a van? And it will summarize those opinions and make them its own. And yeah, you can have ethical problems with that. I totally understand that. But from a pure usage standpoint, it's useful. Another thing I use it for is games. I am inventing games in my head that keep me awake while I'm driving. I just trained my ChatGPT to be a friendly blackjack tutor All I did was tell it that I wanted it to be a blackjack tutor. I gave it how many cards are in the deck and what the rules were, and it is. And then it tells me what's on the table, and I tell it if I hit or stand. It tells me what happens, and then it tells me, well, the odds were in favor of you hitting rather than standing, and here's why. So it's teaching me to play better blackjack. And then after that got tiresome, I said, hey, let's put some personality into this. You are a blackjack with 30 years experience. You've seen it all. You've worked in casinos all over the country, blah, blah, blah. Assume that persona and present things that way. And it did. It started saying things like, winner, winner, chicken dinner and stuff. And then I started tipping it, and it thanked me for anyway, you get the point. It's your creativity that AI is amplifying. And just one last thing, I mentioned this before, one of my favorite things to do is to tell AI about a popular book, have it assume it's one of the characters from the book, and have a conversation with it. It's just like going to an interpretive museum where they're pretending to be the characters, hell, and you can have a conversation with that person. It's not of any historic use or anything like that. It's just fun, and it helps keep me awake on the road. And it will also do trivia. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. Anyway, there's a lot of potentials here. But some more practical things I will mention. It will do wire gauge calculations. Always good to verify, of course. It can do all kinds of conversions from watts to volts to amps or any of that. And a surprising use, I often don't know what I'm making for dinner, but I know what's in the fridge. And so I will tell it, here's what's in the fridge. What options do I have? And it will invent recipes for me. And they're good. And if there's a problem with the recipe, it'll offer suggestions like, this soup is too salty. And it'll say, well, you could try adding some potatoes or adding some more water. Or this soup is too starchy or whatever. It knows how to fix that because it's reading the internet. It's just doing it better than you can or anyone else and better than Google can. And in a way, ChatGPT is replacing Google. Again, I don't trust the results. It's presenting ideas. I treat it like a stranger on the street. Hey, what's the best restaurant in town? And then it tells me. And then I go and see if that's true or not. But I need a place to start, and it does that for me. So I think if you are not, quote unquote, an AI vegan, I think I just invented an offensive term there. But if you're not that, pick one. Find one, get used to it. There's a lot of free ones out there. Microsoft Copilot. I mean, honestly, Pi is a good chatbot that's completely free. There's no way to spend money on it that I'm aware of. But it is definitely worth exploring to see how it can enhance your van life. And now I'm going to mention one app. This is an app. It's not a website. It's an app, but I've been using it a lot lately, and I'd like to promote it. So consider this promotional. And that is the Crossroads app. I've mentioned it before. Crossroads is a van life app that helps people get together who are doing van life together. And a lot of us going to VanFest are using it to keep in touch and to send each other messages and such. It is kind of an intrusive app. It will share your location with everyone. So if you're sensitive to that, make sure you know what you're doing. But I would really like to see this app succeed. I think it is a nice little, very much in-culture app. No advertising, no subscriptions at this point anyway. And it's just kind of fun. It's pleasant. I like it. There's a whole section on you can type in your rig and share that with other people so they can see your rig and stuff. So anyway, I just mentioned that. Crossroads is the app. It's on Android and Apple. You can find it in your app stores. If you disagree with anything I've said or if I've missed something huge, please let me know and I will mention it in a future episode. Thanks to everyone who has bought me gallons at buymeacoffee.com/built-to-go. That's 2 T's, not 3, not 1. Especially those of you who donate every month. I very, very much appreciate it. It keeps ads off the podcast. There are no ads on this podcast. And if you would like to keep that going, please visit buymeacoffee.com/built-to-go and buy me some gallons. And I will thank you, as will everybody else. Tech Talk. I have become obsessed with weird electronics lately. And I thought I'd mention just a few of the weird things I've been playing with. The first one is, and I don't know anybody in a van who has done this, so this might not actually apply to van life so much, but track lighting if you're not familiar with track lighting, it's a very popular thing in the 60s and 70s. And it's 110 volts in the US. It's mains power. But it's a track that you mount, and then you can add any kind of light you want to it. The lights kind of snap in, and you can point them anywhere you want. It's often used for spotlights and things like that. And I always thought, well, why is this limited to lights? Why couldn't I put other things on there, like fans? And I would search and nothing. And this year, they've started making fans for this. And I have one now overhead. One of the problems recording the podcast is that I get hot recording the podcast. I'm wearing headphones that are hot. Sometimes my office is hot, but I can't put on a fan because the sound comes over in the podcast. But I can do this. I don't know that you can hear that, but I just turned on an overhead fan that is in my track light. It's a ceiling fan that just went into the track lighting on the ceiling. Now, again, that's not very practical for van life, but the concept is really interesting in that all it is power, and you can add whatever you want to it. And this is happening all across electronics. People are realizing that you don't necessarily just want a light. Sometimes you want a fan. And there are now a lot of light bulb fans that you can buy. And I just present this to you as an idea that maybe you will be able to do something with. If you are in a place in your van, out of your van, whatever, or you have an old light fixture that just seems kind of useless, you can buy a fan that will screw in like a light bulb. And then you have a fan. And if it's dimmable, maybe you can dim it. I don't know. You got to look. There's a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to give you links or anything. All you can do is search on light bulb fan. There's a bunch of them as seen on TV. But there's actually a lot more than that. And I think they're great. And so I'm going to turn the fan off now. I don't know that you could hear it at all, but I can tell you it made me cooler, and that was nice. Another thing I've become obsessed with are these little tiny plug-in USB nightlights, basically. I gave a bunch away on one of my trips to everyone, and these things have just become so useful, especially for traveling. So I have a new one that I've never seen before I'm holding in my hand. It looks like, well, it looks like two Canada Mints stuck together, and I realize that Canada Mints are an old-fashioned reference. So it's like a tiny marshmallow with a USB-A plug in it. And you simply plug it into any USB-A port and it lights up. And it's actually pretty bright. And you might think, well, what is that for? It's for anything. If you're in a hotel and you want a nightlight, you can just plug this into any USB port. Maybe there's one in the back of the TV. Maybe there's one by your nightstand. Or maybe you have an extra USB adapter and you put this in it and you can plug it in anywhere. Or you have a battery bank that has USB-A output. Maybe it's an old one that doesn't really power much. Well, boom, now it's a flashlight. You just plug this in there and you can basically have a nightlight anywhere you want. It doesn't draw much power. Plug it in during the day to charge it up, and at night you have this portable low-power light that's certainly bright enough to light up the floor anywhere you want. These things are great for cruise ships and I think also for vans. I'm going to bring a bunch of these with me on this trip because I'm essentially going in a no-build and I have not figured out the lighting yet. In order to figure out the lighting in a van, you really need to spend time in the van and see like, God, there's not enough light here, or it's too bright here, or whatever. I am not going to have any of that figured out by the time VanFest happens. And these are going to be my backup plan. If there's not enough light, I'll be able to move one of these wherever I need it. And you just unplug them to turn them off. There's no switches. I do not have a link to these. These came from Amazon Haul, and their stuff rotates all the time. They were very cheap. Sometimes they're like $1 a piece. But the point of this is, think outside the box a little bit. If you have power, you can do more with that power than just what it's intended for. USB has gotten us here, in my opinion. USB was supposed to be simply for data transfer. It's a serial port. It was just for data. And then somebody said, let's add a little bit of power to it, and we have this whole new way to power our lives just because of that. So think outside the box. Any power point you have in your vehicle, whatever the voltage, could be used in unusual ways. Product review. It's time. I have finally joined the induction cooktop revolution. Yeah, well, so anyway, I bought an induction cooktop. I finally bought one. This has long been held out as the best way to cook with electricity in your van. Microwaves accepted. That's a totally different thing. And I looked at them. I mean, IKEA has one, and there's a bunch of cheap ones on Amazon. There's an Amazon Basics one for $40, and none of them really appealed. And then suddenly I saw an open box deal on a fairly fancy one, and I pulled the trigger, and now I have it. In fact, I'm holding it in my hand right now. It is a New Wave Pic Flex. That's P-I-C Flex. Actually, a New Wave is spelled N-U Wave. Live well for less. Folks, this thing, it is an instant pot that you put a pot on. That's the best way I can describe this thing. The controls are very Instant Pot-like. And no, it's not a pressure cooker. It's just a cooktop, but it's big. So big is bad, and it's good. This one is big enough that you can put a 5-quart pot on it. Now, it doesn't heat up for its whole surface. A lot of it is just to support whatever's there. But the middle of it is a burner like you would find on any electric range. It is a normal-sized, quote-unquote, burner. But there's no burning. The trick with these is they cook with magnetism. That's what induction cooking is. So the pan you use has to be magnetic. Specifically, it has to be ferromagnetic. It needs to be made of iron. Cast iron pans, stainless steel, basically anything that a magnet will stick to will work with these. Calphalon, all-clad, maybe, maybe not. My black Calphalon, whatever the heck they are, those pans do not work on this thing. My stainless steel, that same brand pans, do work on this thing, as do really cheap frying pans you might find at the dollar store. Those work on here. Aluminum pans will not work. Glass pans obviously will not work. So if you're going to go this way, you have to have the right pans. But should you go this way? Well, if you're not going to have gas in your van, I know a lot of people don't want to have propane, then yeah, this is the way to heat up a pan in the van. There's no question. Any other electric method is inferior to this. This is the most efficient way to turn electricity into heat for cooking. There's no question about that. With the exception of the old way to cook hot dogs where you take the live wire and the ground or neutral wire and, put a hot dog on a nail and touch the ends together. Do not do that. It will cook the hot dog. It will. It might explode the hot dog. That's a very efficient way to cook a hot dog. But no. The most efficient, controlled, civilized way of cooking. So this thing has a bunch of buttons on it. And one of the ones that I really like is wattage. Yes, it has low, medium. That's all fine. But what you really care about in a van is how many watts is this thing using. And the wattage ranges are 600, 900, and 1300. 1300, I can tell you, will boil a large pot of water in minutes. The power is there. This thing is not slow. But let's say you're running it off a power bank, and boy, that 1300 watts is really pushing it. Your power bank just can't handle that. Well, that's okay, as long as you can handle 600 watts, or say 750 if you want to count the surge, because there's always a surge. This thing will do it. It'll take a little longer, and it will use the same amount of total energy in the end, but it won't overtax your system. It has a lot of safety features. If you take the pot off, it's going to shut off. If the pot isn't seated right, it will not work at all. Like if it's dirty and the pot doesn't sit right on the base, it won't turn on. If you use the wrong kind of pot, it won't turn on. And as soon as you remove the pot, the surface cools down instantly because the surface does not heat. It heats the pan. The pan is what gets hot. You have to try it to really understand what's going on. It's different than any other kind of cooking. It has a timer, and it is pretty tough and compact. There is a fan in it, so it's not silent. Now, I've used it a bit. I've not had a problem with it, but some people have had problems, and the problems are from two places, I'll tell you. If you drop it, it could break. It is made out of tempered glass, at least the surface is. So it'll handle some rough and tumble stuff. If you stick it in a drawer in your van, it's probably going to be fine. But if you drop it on the rocks at your campsite, yeah, it could break. The other thing, and this one is very, very important, it can't get wet. So obviously you're not going to wash it. I mean, you can wipe off the surface, but you're not going to put this in a bucket of soapy water or anything like that. And this is the part that's caught a lot of people, don't let it overboil. because what can happen is if it overboils too much, the liquid will go down the sides and get into the unit and kill it. So that means that you have to be very, very careful of splashes. Anything that splashes on it, wipe it up right away without burning yourself. So all that said, its price point is a little steep. It's $90, but there are open box deals for $69, and that's what I did. And I like it. Now, I haven't tried the cheaper ones. They're probably fine, but I can tell you that this one is good. It's very solid. It's big, but it's not inefficiently big. It is a good size for a whole bunch of different kinds of cooking. And I'm going to put it through its paces completely at VanFest and see how it runs off a Jackery 1500. I don't anticipate any trouble. I have a 400-watt solar panel to charge that thing. As long as the sun's out, I think I'll be able to use this all day. Anyway, I have a link in the show notes from Amazon, and if you follow that link, you will see the regular price and also the open box price if they have any. A lot of people buy these and don't know that their pans don't work on them, and then they send them back. That's why there's so many open box ones. And there's a bunch of different new wave products here, but the one I specifically have is Pick Flex. I like it. I'm excited to be entering this new world of electrical cooking. And heck, this thing is an Illinois company, so while the company's in the U.S., of course, it's made in China, because that's how things are. Tales from the road. This tale is from a long time ago, but it illustrates an important point. I no longer have any interest in going to Disney World. That's a topic for another day. But as a kid, I loved Disney World, because of course I did. And I got to go several times as a kid, and I thank my parents for those opportunities. But there's specific events that I remember that I think teach a life lesson, and a life lesson that applies to van life. The first was in 1976. I was 9 years old. I went with my cousin, who was also 9 years old. And we did the whole Disney experience. We stayed at the Polynesian, and we stayed at the Contemporary, which were the two big hotels at the time. Did all the Disney stuff, rode the e-ticket rides. This was back when they took tickets. But one of the first things I saw when I got there were these speedboats. They had these little yellow speedboats that you could ride and drive around Lake Buena Vista. And I was thrilled by this. I mean, I'd always been interested in cars and vehicles, and the idea that I could have my own autonomous vehicle that had no tracks and no rules, and I could drive it myself. I mean, I had never even done a drive-on lawnmower or anything. I was thrilled with this. So I went to my parents and said, hey, can we do this? And my parents were like, no, let's save that for the end. This will be a special thing. And our last day, we don't have tickets for the park, so that would be a good day to do it. And I was disappointed because I really wanted to do it, and I was a kid, and I didn't know how to regulate those feelings, etc. But okay, did the park, had a great time. It was too hot, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Last day, we're at the Contemporary, and I open the windows in the morning, and there's a guy out the window. And he's on a low roof, shoveling rocks off the roof. The roof was covered with rocks to protect the roof, and he's shoveling them off. I'm like, well, that's weird. And I showed my parents, and they were like, well, that's weird. So we turned on the news. Remember, no cell phones, no internet, no messages, anything like that. And, there's a hurricane coming. There's a hurricane coming, and the park is preparing for the hurricane, and it's closed. They closed Disney World, which meant no motorboat ride for me. I did not get to ride that little yellow motorboat that looked so very, very cool, and I was bitterly disappointed. So fast forward, years later, I think I'm maybe 13, 12, something like that. I don't remember, but I'm a significantly larger person than I was. And we get to Lake Buena Vista. Had condos you could rent. We went with another family, and we rented a condo. I think that's all gone now, but it doesn't matter. We're exploring the condo, and we look outside, and there's boats on the dock right outside. Now, they didn't have speedboats there, but they had paddle boats. And I'm like, this paddle boat is connected to the dock that's connected to our condominium unit. And I'm like, look at this. And I brought a friend with me named Paul. And I'm like, Paul, look at this. This comes with boats. So instantly we jumped on the boats and took off and paddled around for like 2 hours exploring everything. There used to be an old paddle wheeler out there, and we went under the paddle wheeler. It was great. It wasn't the speedboats, but it was great. And then this motorboat, a large one, pulls up with 2 employees on it, and we get basically arrested. They Notice we didn't have life jackets on. And the reason we didn't have life jackets on is there weren't any life jackets, which was odd. But it turns out the reason there weren't life jackets is because these were rental boats. They just park them by the condos, but the place to rent them is just out of view down a corridor that we never saw or even knew was there. And they will give you life jackets when you rent it. So they knew we hadn't rented them because we weren't wearing life jackets. Now, they were super nice about it. All they did was make sure we brought the boats back and got off, and that was it. They didn't give us any trouble or anything. We were a little bit mortified, but it was not the end of the world. So I told this story to my parents, and they felt bad because they gave us permission to do this. And that was the end of my boating experience. I still didn't get to do the yellow speedboats. I was like, geez, I'm never going to get to do this. Finally, couple years later, I'm 15, I think, and I go. My dad is nice enough to take us down there, and he lets me bring a couple of friends. So I bring a couple of friends, one of them who was my age, and one was a few years younger. And we make it a priority. This time we're doing the yellow speedboats. So we were staying out in Fort Wilderness in a trailer, and we just went and did the yellow speedboats. That was the thing we were going to do. And finally, I get behind this yellow speedboat, and my friend of my age is behind this yellow speedboat, and our younger friend is one, and we go out and we're racing around. And my youngest friend leaves us in the very wet dust. He just is twice as fast as we are. And my friend and I, who are well past puberty at this point and starting to put on our adult musculature, are just putting around. These were 9 horsepower motors in these boats, and we weighed too much to take full advantage of them, whereas our younger friend was just having the time of his life. And I sat there and realized that I have lost this opportunity forever. That opportunity that I had, that thing I wanted to do in 1976, I can no longer do ever. And that's true because they got rid of the speedboats as well, but I missed that opportunity because my parents, who did something in their good nature, decided that we should save that for later, and that later never came. And that is the lesson. You've got to be very careful with saving things for later. Laters are not guaranteed. And I learned that lesson then in a very, very gentle way. But there are plenty of stories I have about people learning it in the worst way possible, where they save up for years and years and years to do something only to find that that thing is no longer available to them, whether through health or money or circumstances. If there's something you really want to do, it's core to your being that you do this thing, and you can do it, I strongly encourage you to do it. And Vanlife could be one of those things. A place to visit. I promised you a place you've probably never heard of, and I could be wrong. Obviously, someone's heard of every place, else there wouldn't be a place. But this place is really unusual, and I have never heard of it, and I've been around a little bit. It is called Toadstool Geologic Park. And if you've ever seen the movie Galaxy Quest, you have seen scenes where these little miners, not miners, are running around and there's a big rock monster and everything. And this is not that place. That's Goblin State Park, I believe, in Utah. But this place looks like that place. It is a rocky, kind of crazy landscape with these toadstool rock structures, and it's exactly the place you would want to film a sci-fi movie. Now, this place is in the Badlands, but it's not in South Dakota. It's in Nebraska. That's right, that flyover state that you thought was nothing but a vast expanse of grasses and corn and lots and lots and lots of miles. It is actually a cool place to visit. Nebraska has a lot going for it. It's just very spread out. You have to hunt for it. This is in the northwestern part of the state. It's a part of the state I don't get to often because I'm usually heading to Colorado, which takes me to the southeastern part of the state. The northwestern part of the state is the Wyoming part of Nebraska. It's where you're going to see antelope and things start to look very much like Wyoming, including this place. Now, this place has camping and little else. Not a lot of services. This is definitely a boondockers kind of place, but it is a park run by the government. It's actually managed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture for some reason, and they have a campground there, and it's about $15 a night to park your rig there. And then you can wander around in this crazy environment that looks very much otherworldly. You can learn about the geology of the place. I mean, this is a geological place. The geology is what you're supposed to go here to see and learn about how the sand hills of Nebraska were formed and how compression and metamorphosis led to the stones here, and then erosion. There was a harder layer on top and a softer layer on the bottom, and over time wind and water cut away at the bottom, but the harder part at the top stayed, and that created these toadstool shapes. It looks like a really cool place. And here's the thing. When you go to this place, you're not very far from Devil's Tower. So you could do a whole alien trip. You could go here, check it out, and then go to Devil's Tower, and then stay at the KOA there and watch Close Encounters with Devil's Tower right there. I have to do this. This is on my bucket list. It's something that wouldn't even be really hard for me to do. I just kind of need a weekend to do it. But now I'm going to do it by going to Toadstool Geologic Park as well. I have a link in the show notes to the very long URL the government has for it, but you can just search for Toadstool Geologic Park. But it's probably a good idea to put Nebraska in there because it's not the first place I think of for this kind of geology. Resource recommendation. Okay, we're really going out on the edge here. You have a resource that you may have never used, but it's one that I have used a lot. It does come with some risks, but it can be very, very helpful for a number of things. It's a rock. Now, hear me out. I'm not suggesting you go buy a rock and take it in the van with you. I'm suggesting you look at rocks as a resource, not from a geological perspective, but as a heavy, hard thing. I have used rocks in my van and while camping as hammers, as tire stops, to put on the stakes that are holding guy lines to make them harder to pull out, to mark off areas like park here or don't walk here. I have used them for heat, where I've had them in the fire, and then when it's time to go to sleep, I take one of those rocks very carefully and wrap it in a non-flammable material and put it in my sleeping bag, and that has kept me warm for a very, very long time. I use hot water bottles now, but I have used rocks for that. I have even cooked with rocks, not with fire, but with a rock. This is actually a traditional way that Native Americans cooked, because one thing about a hot rock versus a fire is the temperature is controllable. You take a rock, you clean it, you heat it up in the fire, and you put it in a vessel of water, and it heats up the water. And that water becomes soup. It's stone soup, except it's not stone soup as a metaphor or as a life lesson. It's stone soup as a very practical exercise. If you think that sounds crazy and stupid and who would ever do that, I ate at the fanciest restaurant in Chicago called Alinea. Michelin star rated, unbelievable prestige at this place. And I'm sorry, it wasn't Alinea, it was Next, the restaurant that's near, it's another Ashat's restaurant. It's not quite Alinea, but it's still an amazing place, and it's still a ridiculous amount of money. Anyway, that said, it was at Next. The first dish they served was a bowl of water with nothing in it. And then they brought a hot stone and put it in the dish. And then they brought in some herbs and some concentrated broth and some meat. And they did all this. Then they took out the stone, and I had a lovely bowl of hot soup, all because of a hot stone. Stones are a resource. Now, if you're in the Midwest like I am, stones are also pretty rare. You know, growing up in New England, rocks, stones were just everywhere. Hey, go get a rock. 5 seconds later, they come back with a rock. Here, go get a rock, you're probably going to Home Depot. There are no rocks in the Midwest except in very certain places. But if you have rocks around, use them. If there's one thing that explains all the mega structures and cairns and everything that are left in history that people claim they can't explain, it's the fact that people use rocks for things, and always have, and rocks are persistent. I said they were dangerous. They can be. If you're heating up rocks in a fire, they can do things like explode. Sandstone by a river can absorb water, heat it in the fire, water expands as steam, and the rock explodes. So use your judgment if you use your rocks in unusual ways. But rocks are actually a big resource. And sometimes you just find that really just right, good rock, and you take it home. And I have one of those that I found in Africa. And it turns out it's a stone tool made by somebody who knows how long ago that had a whole life as a tool, and then ended up on the ground, and then ended up in my suitcase, and now it is with me in Chicago. So sometimes rocks are stories as well. Well, folks, thank you very much for listening to episode 287. If you need to get a hold of me for any reason, I am Jeff at builttogo.com, and I really hope to see you at VanFest. And if I don't, well, you'll hear all about it in the coming weeks. Music, as always, is by Simon Wagg. And until next time, remember the words of George Herbert, who said, "Do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand and work with whatever tools you may have at your command. And better tools will be found as you go along."